Your breath into your body. Give yourself a shake and feel the frequencies pass through you, cleansing, purifying, creating balance, bringing your most amazing bioorganic computer into harmony and resonance. The Flock, the Autobiography of a Multiple Personality by Joan Frances Casey with Lynn Wilson. Chapter 4. I continued to go twice weekly to see Lynn. The suicidal urges had ended, but the more I listened as the inside part of me talked, the more intrigued I became. The part of me who spoke without my input felt special, validated by Lynn's attention. Lynn's questions often made that inside part uncomfortable, because there seemed to be so much that part didn't really remember. But for the first time, I heard that part of me sound safe in saying, I don't know. Lynn didn't call me a liar, as so many other people had. And she didn't laugh when the part of me who liked being called Joe admitted not knowing what clothes I was wearing without looking down to see. I listened attentively, but apathetically, interested, but with no desire to act, and thought that Lynn must be incredibly naive. She acted as though she believed me, and her belief in me made me feel confused. After I left Lynn's office, I felt guilty about not doing a better job to control what I was saying. Surely I was playing an elaborate game of make-believe with Lynn. Surely I could stop any time I wanted to. But in Lynn's office, I often felt too drowsy to stop anything. Effortlessly, I was presenting Lynn with characterizations unlike the real me. Characterizations that I thought of as them, not me. With other therapists, I'd quickly begun to feel so foolish that I couldn't let my inside out. I realised only after the sessions that Lynn touched different nerves at different times, called forth varied responses, even as I watched, uncaring, from my internal perch. Sometimes I saw myself react as a little girl who peered out at this lady through half-closed eyes. Curling up in a big chair was the only way to respond when Lynn reached out and said, "It hurts so bad, doesn't it?" Sometimes I heard myself defending my mother, the mother who never felt like mine. "Your mother doesn't sound like a very supportive person to me," Lynn observed one day. I heard myself saying unequivocally, "My mother knows that there isn't anything wrong with me. There never is. I'm a very, very lucky girl, and I can't let myself get caught up in self-pity. My mother is a lab technician. She spends her time helping sick people who really need her. She knows what's best for me." But whatever turmoil might trap me mid-session, I usually manage to shake it free and feel fully in control at the end. I'd smile and stretch, telling Lynn through my cat-cozy manner that I attached no significance to the bullshit she had observed in the last hour. None of it had anything to do with me. Lynn always smiled back and asked, "Feeling better?" "Much," I answered cheerfully and went on my way. Case note, March the 30th, 1981. Miss Casey clearly has periods of dissociation. She describes two such incidents within the past 6 months. One evening, her mother-in-law, who reportedly never cared for her, called to tell Miss Casey that she was happy Keith was getting a divorce. And her mother-in-law said, "You ruined my son's life." Miss Casey woke up at a shopping mall with no idea of how she'd gotten there or what had happened in the intervening time. Another episode occurred after her own mother called to cancel a trip to Chicago. Miss Casey's mother had not visited her deal with the divorce. Miss Casey's mother had not visited her for 2 years, and she was counting on her mother's support in helping her deal with the divorce. Miss Casey's reported waking up in the car, parked in front of a friend's house, uncertain as to whether she was on her way to see her friend or on her way home. Since I suspect that Miss Casey has also been dissociating during her sessions with me, I will continue encouraging her to talk about these incidents. The patient who bounces in and out of my office with a "what the hell" attitude is very different from the aspect I'm talking with during the majority of the treatment session. And that aspect is different again from the scared child and the mother advocate. I'm beginning to think that Miss Casey may suffer from multiple personality disorder. But this is unsettling me. I've never seen a case, nor have my colleagues. Plan 1. Reread Tamar. The rugged man ran round the rugged rock. The rugged man ran round the rugged rock. Shh. Plan 1. Reread Three Faces of Eve and Sybil and see if I'm on the right track. 2. Search for an acknowledgement consult. 3. Explore the possibility with Miss Casey and continue supporting all parts of this very complex patient. Fwa, he would say fwa, fwa. Our left rest and digest nerve, vagus nerve is kicking in. Wonderful. Vision's changing. Early in my first appointment in April, Lynn told me that she suspected that I suffered from multiple personality disorder. Oh, brother, I thought. What's this lady's problem? She might as well have told me that I was possessed by demons. I was more worried about her mental state than my own when she said that. But I refrained from expressing my derision. Professionals don't like their diagnoses questioned. I spent the evening ticking off why I wasn't a multiple. Sure, I forgot things sometimes and failed to pay attention to everything I was doing. So did everybody else. Occasionally, I heard myself saying something I didn't believe. Something that seemed to pop out of nowhere. Eric Burns' transactional analysis explained it perfectly. We all have various parts, parent, adult, child, within us. People said I had a flair for the dramatic, but what Lynn suggested was just plain weird. Multiple personality was some sort of mental illness. I certainly didn't need psychiatric care. I was fine, unless the pressure of doing so much or being rejected put me off balance. And I had done a lot. I had completed my BA at the University of Virginia in 3.5 years, longer than I expected because Keith and I didn't have the money for me to take as many courses as I wanted each semester. And I worked full-time. I had interned with a state legislator, completed my teaching certification here in Chicago, was doing graduate study, again working full-time, and still pursuing my hobby of breeding, training, and showing Springer Spaniels. Now I was applying for high school teaching jobs. People called me compulsive, a workaholic, over-energized, an overachiever, too intense, but no one would call me crazy. Chapter 5. Case note, April the 9th, 1981. Miss Casey is terrified at the thought that she might be a multiple. I decided not to force a discussion of the diagnosis until I am more certain myself of how to deal with this. My patient requires unquestioned support, far more now than she needs debate over a particular psychiatric label. But as soon as I made that decision, Miss Casey presented her multiplicity in a more florid way. Miss Casey was working on an annual fundraiser with United Way, where her husband is employed. During our sessions, she talked of her fear of this intense involvement with Keith and the people who used to be their mutual friends. But still she felt compelled to meet her responsibilities. However, in direct contrast with this fearful presentation at the beginning of our last session, she proceeded to talk animatedly about the event, about how much fun she would have there. Since I knew I would be out of town during the weekend of the fundraiser, I encouraged Miss Casey to use the on-call number, advising her that she would find somebody to talk to, and stressed that I would see her for our Monday appointment after the weekend. She said that she would be very busy with the United Way and felt she probably wouldn't need any support. Because of poor flying conditions and airline cancellations, I was unable to get back in time on Monday and had to have the receptionist reschedule the appointment. When I finally saw Miss Casey today, she seemed different, bright, gay, bouncy and happy. She told me that she hadn't minded missing our appointment. She inquired whether I had had a good time and said she had a ball at the fundraiser. She had explained to her friends that she and Keith were having a little trouble now, but that she was sure it would all work out. I remarked on the change, and Miss Casey insisted that Keith was just angry and that he had had the right to be. She really fucked it up. When I asked who she was, Miss Casey replied, "Joe, of course." When I asked her name, she told me, "Renee." I was stronger, more in control than I had been before meeting Lynn, and the suicidal impulses were gone. But that inside-out part of me was stronger as well. This was not the way the game was supposed to work. Before, it had just gotten quiet inside. Now, I noticed at least one voice engaged in active thinking. The voice that most often talked when I turned inside out in Lynn's office. The voice muttering, "It's better without Keith. I really need a lot of private time right now," concerned me when I thought about ways to remind Keith that he loved me. The voice mumbling, "I'm bad, nobody could really like me," when Lynn rescheduled the appointment made me certain that it was time to get out of therapy. But I was sad at the prospect of not seeing Lynn anymore. She seemed more like a real person than had any of the previous therapists, and I felt guilty about turning inside out in her office. I had just been playing that game to release pressure and had deceived her into thinking I had multiple personalities. This would be my last visit. If I explained to Lynn what was going on, she'd understand that I really didn't need to see a social worker. She could give the time to somebody who needed it. I told Lynn my real name so that I could help her understand the game. "Today's the last day," I said, "and I'm just going to talk to you as the person I really am." I tried to be earnest enough so that she'd know I was serious, but light enough so that she'd feel free to tell me to stop that nonsense. "You ought to feel really special," I said extravagantly. "I hardly ever tell anyone that my name is Renee. But if you're going to understand the game I play, you've got to separate me from the voice I made up that said to call her Joe." Lynn nodded, but seemed more cautious than she had the other times I had seen her. I do feel flattered that you've told me your name, Renee, she said without even smiling. Could you talk in the J voice for me, just so that I know the difference? I sighed. This was going to be complicated to explain. I heard that voice say that nobody would ever like her, I said. It's as though she felt bad that you cancelled the appointment and then she got mad because she felt bad, and so I just can't make it happen now. But it's just a game anyway. Renee, Lynn said gently, this is a little confusing, but I think that you're describing a lot more than a voice there. I groaned. I was trying to own up to the game I had been playing, and Lynn was taking this as more evidence for her diagnosis. How could a voice feel bad or get mad? How could a voice feel bad or get mad? Lynn asked. It was just me pretending to feel that way, I said, feeling flustered. I couldn't believe that Lynn was even bothering to argue. What did she care? I know everything that's happened in here, but sometimes I just feel too lazy to stop it. The more I tried to explain, the more confused and humiliated I felt. It's kind of a habit, I finished, feeling as lame as I sounded. That wasn't what I meant, but I didn't know what to say. I screwed up, I said. I'm sorry. It's okay, Renee. You haven't done anything wrong, Lynn said. Whatever it is, we can handle it together, but I think that's going to take longer than this session. So, for right now, why don't you not worry about quitting therapy and tell me more about the voices? It really is okay to tell me about it. It's just a game, I said again. But I felt less frightened. Lynn really wanted to help me, and she wasn't upset with me for having wasted her time. I sort of relaxed and let my inside out. And when your inside comes out, it speaks in a different voice that you made up. I nodded a couple of times and gritted my teeth, grateful that Lynn was beginning to understand. I was still a little afraid that she might get angry and throw me out of her office. The voices must go with characters, Lynn said. Don't worry about how it sounds, just tell me about the characters that you've been presenting to me. Well, there's the one who introduced herself the first day and told you about her father's death. That's Jo. That part is always so serious. She really likes Steve and is glad that Keith wants a divorce. And there's a little girl whose name is Missy. She knows that it's bad to come outside, but somehow in here it occasionally happens. She likes it when you touch her, but she's afraid to talk. And there's one more. You've talked to one other voice, Joan Frances. She thinks that her mother is great. When Jo says her father is great, Joan Frances thinks she has to stick up for her mom. I don't know why I say those things, but when I do, I feel really bad and then tell you the truth. I love Keith, not Steve. Nancy and Ray never really felt like parents to me. Lynn smiled at me. That's why so much of what I said in here seemed contradictory, I said, smiling a little. I really didn't mean to lie. I know, sweetie, Lynn said. I don't think that what you were doing counts as lying. Her eyes were kind and soft, but her body rocked in concentration. Help me understand how the game is played, Lynn said. Where does Renee go when Missy comes out? I go inside, but I'm nearby, I said. It's like I'm at the back of the theatre watching a play. But I get bored watching without really meaning to. I leave the theatre and go inside another room in my head. Sometimes a question or some sort of warning bell calls me out. And when I come back, I know what happened. But I don't feel like I really did anything. Lynn listened thoughtfully. She acted as though she believed me. That voice you call Jo, why can't she remember like you? Why does she seem so confused and uncertain? I felt triumph and finally able to make my point. It's because she's just a voice or like a character in a play. I'm the real person. In your game, Lynn said, do the voices look like anything? Missy is an ugly little girl, about 5. She has fuzzy brown hair and skinny arms and legs. Jo is an ugly 25-year-old. Jo has brown stringy hair and a long face like this, I said, mimicking Jo's expression. And she had spent her life in shirts and jeans unless I came out to get dressed in the morning. Joan Frances wants to look like her pretty mother and sister, so she likes to put on makeup and always sits up straight. And of course, you can see me. I'm pretty and younger than Jo. And Joan Frances, I'm only 19 and my hair is soft and wavy. Surely you can see the difference. Okay, Renee, let me tell you what I think, Lynn said. I know that you want to believe that you have control over all of this, but I really don't think you do. You get scared about what the others do because sometimes you've been forced to realise that you don't have control. I do feel really special that you're letting me close enough to help you with all of this, and I'm going to have to ask you to trust me even a little more. What you want is to never again worry about losing control to one of those voices, right? Right, I said, but felt trembly, scared of what Lynn might do now that she knew the truth. You've told me about the game, she said. Now let me play. Our time is up for today, but next time just relax and let the inside out, if you can, and try to stay close enough to watch without interfering with anything. I think you might be surprised at what you can learn. I need to think about it, I said, and got up to leave. But you'll come back? Lynn asked. Sure, guess so, I said. I think you're a very remarkable woman, she said. I left Lynn's office that day unable to sort it all out. I knew that Lynn was likely to be furious when she fully comprehended the game. But I felt intrigued too. I had never had the chance before to understand why the pressure built up inside, or why I got suicidal without wanting to die. Lynn seemed confident. I guess I did trust her a little. At the start of the next session, Lynn met me in the waiting room and put her arm around my shoulders as we walked back to her office. Once inside, she said, I'm tremendously proud of you for giving this a try. Do you think you can relax and let Jo out? I guess so, I said. Took a deep breath and slipped in. Jo found herself face to face with a sympathetic but determined therapist. I'm sorry that we missed an appointment, Jo, Lynn said, but I'm glad to see you. Jo said nothing, uncomfortable with Lynn's new directness. Did anyone ever call you Missy? Lynn asked. My father, Jo said with surprise. How about Joan Frances? That's what my mother calls me. Jo answered and wondered if Lynn had had a conversation with her mother. Does the name Renee mean anything to you? Lynn asked. Jo blushed and wondered why Lynn had heard that name. She had never told her mother about Renee Montcalm. That's a name I made up myself, Jo said. When Jo was 9 years old, she decided that she wanted to spend her life hiding away and writing books. I knew that my books would have a limited audience and wouldn't earn enough to support me, so I decided that I'd write for money as well. But I didn't want to publish that under my own name. Renee Montcalm is my pseudonym, but I actually imagined her as more. Now it seems childish, Jo explained to Lynn, but at the time I thought commercial writing would damage my credibility as a scholar. The Renee that I dreamed of was bright, witty, social. It was kind of a flashy veneer to protect the real me from dealing with the public. It's not at all childish, Lynn said. What you've described is exactly what's happened. Jo looked at her, silent but afraid. You've got Renee and Missy and Joan Frances too, who all helped protect you, Lynn said reassuringly. You're so unsure of things because these personalities handle a lot of your life when you're not looking. Jo looked squarely back at Lynn. That's crazy, she said. No, not at all, Lynn responded. It's very creative. I'll prove it to you. Tell me what was going on during the hour before you came in here. Jo felt the blankness stab at her, the familiar lack of answer and accompanying panic. The room swam before her and she closed her eyes. Joan Frances, who lacked Jo's amnesia, twisted the panic into cool anger. She glared briefly at Lynn before she responded with a slight smile of derision. I spent the last hour before my appointment ordering supplies for the biology department. It was requisition number 4007. 4007. The order included a dozen dissection kits, some tubing, and more animals than I care to list. I left the office, got my car out of the parking lot, and drove here. I parked a metre in front of the building, and if I don't leave on time, I'll get a ticket. I am impressed, Lynn said. You have good recall, Joan Frances. She smiled thinly in return. I gave Joan Frances' anger a wide berth as I struggled back out. I needed to talk to Lynn for a minute before I left. Wow, I said, grinning sheepishly at her. Renee, Lynn said, so what do you think now? I guess maybe you're right, I said. Maybe they do think independently of me, but I think it's happening because you let it. If you just said stop, it would. No, sweetie, it's not like that, Lynn said. You don't have that control, and neither do I. But together you and I will find a way to figure it out. I'm not so sure about that, I said with a flash of insight. Joan Frances doesn't even have as much control as I have, but she's pretty sure that her mother will make this stop. Joan Frances got to the car before she got a ticket and hurried back to the apartment. She was filled with a sense of dread. Her mother would be furious if she knew about this. But if Joan Frances tried to conceal it, her mother would find it out. She always did. And either way, her mother might disown her. That evening, Joan Frances called her mother. She mentioned offhandedly that she was seeing a therapist, and her mother reacted as she had feared. That's a waste of time, Nancy said. Her anger was clear even through the phone lines. Look at me. You don't see me running to a therapist every little crisis. My stepfather abused me. You've seen the scars on my back from the beatings, and I came through it without a therapist. Your father treated me like dirt, but I still took care of him when he was dying. I see really sick people every day, and I've learned from them that I can't go around feeling sorry for myself. You're a very lucky girl, and it's time you realised that. It's time you stood on your own 2 feet. Joan Frances told her mother that she was right and shakily called the clinic's after-hours number. She left a message for Lynn to call. I can't see you anymore, Joan Frances said when Lynn returned the call. There's nothing wrong with me. I have to stop feeling sorry for myself. Lynn said, I'm here. I want to see you. I can help you. I think that you should come in for your appointment. Case note, May the 1st, 1981. Miss Casey has become quite dependent on evening phone calls. Missy, who is afraid to speak when she's in my office, is the most frequent caller, although I usually end the conversation by finding Joe on the line, and sometimes I talk to these two along with Renee and Joan Frances during a single phone call. I am continually surprised that I have no difficulty in distinguishing which one I am talking to. There is a problem, however. I'm getting to me through the hospital on-call service. There is a problem, however, in getting to me through the on-call service. I am particularly concerned because of my upcoming trip to New Orleans. I have made arrangements to let the hospital know of my whereabouts each night so that I can be notified of any calls, even though I am told that when Miss Casey reaches the on-call number, she says that I am not to be bothered. It's as though she expects to find me at the other end of the line and feels confused that I am not there. I feel strongly that it is important to remain accessible even during my trip. I am not sure that she really understands when I'm away and when I am in town. Missy is not in touch with outside reality. She doesn't seem to have the resources to tell the on-call operator anything more than her first name. I found the next day only that Missy called for me, that this very confused person hung up when asked for further information, such as her last name, or whether this was an emergency. The problem of the on-call operator is compounded by the fact that Missy refers to herself not in the first person but rather as you, as though she has no sense of identity aside from the reference provided by other people. For example, she tells the on-call operator, "You want to talk to your friend Lynn." When she does get through, with I suspect the helpful intervention of another personality, and I call her back, Missy tells me secrets that she won't yet talk about in the office. She's told me that she did not want to grow up to be a woman like her mother, so she prayed to God every night to make you a boy. Until God makes you a boy, you're not getting to get any bigger. Missy is giving me information that is vital in my understanding of this patient. E.g., she was supposed to have been a boy and is told by her mummy and daddy that she remembers things all wrong. She tells me that she's not allowed, by the other personalities, to talk to people face to face. She also hints that there are many things she knows that the other girl inside consider dangerous to tell. If she is unable to reach me, she may withdraw completely. I couldn't understand why Lynn would ruin her vacation by staying in touch, but she did, 3 times via telephone from New Orleans. At our first session after she returned, I told her that she was making a mistake. She was only encouraging Joe and Missy to think that they had someone to depend on. I knew it was good for them to learn that people couldn't always be available. Other people had their own lives and their own problems. If Joe and Missy didn't understand that by now, it was time they figured it out. Even Joe told Lynn that she didn't have to be so nice. People can't be there just because I need them, Joe said. My father taught me that. My parents were separated when I was in high school. My father insisted that I live with my mother, and then he refused to give me his phone number or tell me where he lived. No one has ever been there constantly for me. I don't know why you're doing this. Chapter 6. Diary, May the 7th, 1987. May the 7th, 1981. I will keep case notes concerning Miss Casey's progress as required by the unit, but feel more free to explore my personal and clinical reactions in writings that are less subject to scrutiny of others. I don't think I'm being paranoid. I feel like a pioneer, but I also am beginning to feel misunderstood. Some of my colleagues and even my supervisor seem concerned about the amount of attention I'm giving Joe. Yesterday, during the staff's case reporting session, Harry suggested that Joe might be manipulating me by telling me secrets over the telephone. I think he was surprised that I bristled in response. I told him that I knew she was becoming dependent on me, and I explained, rather testily, I admit, that Joe came into my office with her pathological dependency. I didn't create it. I said that it was only natural that the dependency would be expressed if I was provided adequate treatment. Later, in private, I apologized to him. I had reacted defensively at the meeting because I had been informed that some of the staff didn't believe in MPD. I told Harry that I wanted his approval for any unorthodox treatment techniques and that I wanted to talk with him about the case. I told Harry that I wanted his approval for any unorthodox treatment techniques and I wanted to talk with him about the case, but didn't want it open for peer review right now. I need to be able to explore treatment ideas without defending the diagnosis at every turn. I'm well aware that Jo, in all of her various parts, is testing me to see if I'll come through with what I promise. Despite Harry's concern, I am being very careful not to promise more than I can give. I can tell that rejection would actually be easier for some of the personalities to handle than my sincerely and willingly responding to their needs. When I cuddle or comfort little Missy, she cringes as though expecting punishment for her expression of need. Both Rennie and Joan Frances have given me obviously parent-inspired warnings that you don't know what you're getting yourself into by responding to the personality's needs. The Jo personality refuses to acknowledge openly that she has any needs whatsoever. I find that the pathology, dependency, need, and fear of rejection all make far more sense than talking of malingering or manipulation if one accepts the diagnosis of multiple personality disorder. That is a very large if for my colleagues. Their uncertainty is making me take stock of my own psyche and of my professional intuitions as well. I'm so sure of the diagnosis during the sessions. The transformations are undeniable. I usually see see at least Renee and Joe during each appointment, and I can tell when a personality switch is occurring. There's always a pause, a lowering of eyelids. Then Renee comes in a flash, bright, gay, and immediately orientated. Joe comes slowly, seeming dazed, fuzzy, almost drugged, not sure of where she is or how much time she has lost. Sometimes the transformation period, which lasts no more than half a minute, brings yet someone else. Those same eyes, so pleading and full of pain in Joe, so twinkling and merry in Renee, grow cold and full of contempt. This is Joan Frances, who despises herself for her play acting, and who hates me for allowing it to continue. Renee has at least tacitly given up her description of this all as a game, but Joan Frances seems wedded to the idea. I even see physical differences among them. Renee's hands seem delicate and long-fingered, and then turn rough and spatulate when Joe has control. The whole body seems to shrink when Missy is out. I can't deny that I am both intrigued and overwhelmed by this patient. Treating Joe is a challenge that I haven't known in 20 years of clinical work. Despite the skepticism around the office, I'm pleased to have the chance to work with a disorder that is apparently so rare. Treating a multiple raises so many new questions for me. The legal and ethical tenets of confidentiality, for example, usually so straightforward, now have me stumped. I'd never repeat what a patient told me to some other patient, but I am not sure how this applies to information that is offered by one personality. Should I keep Missy's secrets as though she were alone in her body? I would certainly keep my promise to a personality if I had verbally assured her that I would not tell something to another personality. But otherwise, I think that it is up to me to decide what to share. Missy's secrets are important for Joe Frances, and Renee to hear. I am sharing them with Joe because I think that Joe needs to confront the fact that she was most probably a victim of child abuse. So far, Missy seems unaware of or unconcerned about my talks with Joe. If Missy reacts in a negative way to my sharing her secrets, I will reevaluate the situation. The lack of support I feel among my colleagues makes me unwilling to talk with them about this case. In what is probably a far greater breach of confidentiality, I have been taking my own uncertainty and excitement home. Since we've been married, Gordon and I have shared many clinical experiences. At his inner city high school, Gordon has worked with his share of abused and dysfunctional children, and he has been the object of misplaced hostility. He says that Jo, in all of her various personalities, acts and reacts much like his abused students. Gordon has answered the phone when the personalities call and has learned to distinguish the different voices and vocal mannerisms. His willingness to accept the reality of the disorder, even hearing most of it secondhand, and his insight from 20 years of teaching make him a very valuable colleague and confidant. Unlike my discussions at the office, I can talk out my dilemmas with him without his stopping to ask me if I am sure she is a multiple. I honestly care about Miss Casey and want her to be well. I know that she will take more time, energy and commitment than my other patients, but I'm willing to do what is needed. It feels very good to know that I'll have Gordon's caring for me and his empathy for Jo to support me through the process. Who is this Lynn Wilson, and what is she trying to prove? 2 months into treatment, I thought that by now Lynn would be sick of me, but instead she seemed more and more accommodating. Lynn gave each personality a home phone number and bought an answering machine so she'd know if anyone tried to reach her. I figured that one of the reasons she was so willing to schedule extra time was that money was not an issue. Lynn worked for the university hospital outpatient clinic on salary. She didn't depend on her patients' fees, as did therapists in private practice. My student health insurance plan paid for psychotherapy as long as I used the university clinic. I liked that Lynn liked me, and she had convinced me that the voices had minds and experiences of their own. Jo, for example, told Lynn that she had always felt out of place but had never suspected that she might have a problem that could be fixed. Now that she had the diagnosis to explain her sense of reality, she sorted some of the chaotic jumble of thoughts and memories. I'd feel funny having daydreamed my way through whole seasons, Jo said, but then I'd hear someone say, time flies, or how did it get to be 3 o'clock already? And I'd think that everyone was like me. But I guess I never quite convinced myself because I'm so afraid of people. It's like I'm carrying around this huge secret and that I'm never supposed to tell. But since I don't remember just what I'm supposed to keep secret, I'm afraid I'll tell it by mistake. Oh, sweetie, you've got a pot full of secrets, Lynn said. Missy's just now beginning to tell me some of them. Don't say that name, Jo said. Makes me feel stupid for you to talk about Missy as though it were some other person. I don't want to hear what I say in my sleep. During the sessions, Lynn recognised when Missy appeared and told her that it was safe to talk to her there. Missy refused to speak. But when Lynn got out of her chair and sat down on the rug and said, "Come on, sweetie, you can sit with me," she eagerly scrambled from her chair into Lynn's arms. She felt lulled by Lynn's warmth, her rocking, her gentle voice. "It's your hand," she whispered one night to Lynn on the phone. "What about your hand, sweetie?" Lynn asked. "It's bad hand." "No, Missy, your hands are good hands," Lynn said. "I like to hold your hands when you sit with me in the office." "Bad hand," Missy insisted. "Sister Mary said so. Right hand right, left hand bad." Missy had not been allowed to use her naturally dominant left hand. The nuns who taught her slapped her hand with a ruler or made her sit on it when they found her holding a crayon or pencil with her left hand. "Mummy says you're bad. Daddy says you're bad. Daddy says you're stupid. Mummy says you're lazy." "You're a very good girl," Lynn reassured Missy. "I want you to come see me at the office, and you can colour with whatever hand you like." At peace, after such conversations, Missy slipped back inside, and Jo often woke up, clutching the telephone, hearing Lynn's comforting voice through the receiver. "I'm sorry that I bothered you," Jo said, "but I didn't know that I called you tonight. I'm sorry." "Don't worry about it, Jo," Lynn said. "You didn't call me, Missy did. Everything's okay. We'll talk about it the next time we're together." "Back in the office," Lynn said. "Missy acts like an abused child, but that's not true," Jo said. "I couldn't have been abused." "Just how do you know, Jo, that your parents never abused you?" Lynn asked. "That's simple," Jo said. "I don't remember my mother or father ever being mean to me." Jo stopped, struck by a new understanding. "You know, I don't have any preschool memories of being alone with my mother." Now that she thought about it, that was strange. Although both her parents had worked full-time since she was 3, she had very early memories of being with her father and no memories of being alone with her mother. She remembered babysitters, but not her mother. Jo dismissed her new insight. Her father wouldn't let her be hurt. Jo did recall that one time, when she was 3 or 4, her father had asked how she had gotten a new bruise on her leg. Mother's explanation seemed reasonable even now. Joan Frances is a very clumsy child. Jo knew she had to be utterly truthful, even when her version of the truth conflicted with what Lynn wanted to hear. Truth was vital to Jo, because she had had a hard enough time keeping track of the spotty reality she experienced. Jo realised that she wasn't clear enough about what really happened ever to be a convincing liar. Jo tried to think about her suspicion that Lynn liked her. She figured that Lynn was nice to her because she was a patient. Jo's mother had shown her what it meant to have a professional mask. The times Jo saw her mother at work in the lab, busy and efficient as she drew blood and marked vials, Nancy smiled warmly at the patients, ready with a sympathetic comment. If a patient or doctor called Nancy at home, she immediately became the caring professional, no matter what had been happening before the phone rang. When Lynn hung up after the evening phone call from Missy, Jo suspected that Lynn resumed screaming at her husband or kids. Lynn told Jo that she honestly cared about her, but Jo couldn't trust that. Her parents had said that they cared, but they didn't seem to like her much. She figured that they had to care for her. They didn't have a choice. Other people seemed to care about her for short periods, some teachers in high school, Keith, but they all had gone away, no matter how much Jo had come to depend on them. Jo supposed she was lonely, but her loneliness was an integral part of her life. She sometimes wondered what it would be like to have a friend, to feel intimate connection with another person. Jo understood that Lynn's concern, genuine or not, was a precious but temporary gift. She continually apologised for all the phone calls she didn't remember making. Lynn said that she wouldn't let Jo interfere in a way that would lead to rejection. It would be bad for both of us, Jo, if I let you take more than I have to give. Don't worry, I can take care of myself.
Apologies, Mummy couldn't wait. Oh, seems bloody number. Longer chapter than thought. I don't know.
Jo understood that Lynn's concerns, genuine or not, was a precious but temporary gift. She continually apologised for all the phone calls she didn't remember making. Lynn said that she wouldn't let Jo interfere in a way that would lead to rejection. It would be bad for both of us. Jo, if I let you take more than I have to give, don't worry, I can take care of myself. Jo reacted to Lynn's assurances with humiliation. Of course, you can take care of yourself, Jo said. You protect yourself so that I don't intrude. I know that you need to protect yourself from me, but I feel so bad, so guilty when you remind me of that, as though I could presume to be important enough to intrude. While Jo worried about her dependency on the therapist would lead to Lynn's rejection, the Joan Frances personality worried that the same dependency would lead to her mother's abandonment. Joan Frances knew that her mother would not approve of her seeing Lynn, but no matter how strongly she made the resolution to stop therapy, she found herself sitting in Lynn's office or leaving the building after a vaguely remembered appointment session. Joan Frances pleaded with Lynn to help her. Please make me better before my mother tells me that I must stop seeing you. Please make me a better person so that she will love me. Diary, May the 8th, 1981. It's clear that the various personalities I'm seeing are quite different from one another. The physical changes are startling. I have come to know Missy, Jo, Renee, and Joan Frances well, and I'm no longer surprised by their move from one personality to another. In fact, I experience each of them as different from the others in the same way as my other patients are different from one another. Although they share the same body, they are not the same and do not wear the body in the same way. It may be more accurate to say that the various personalities share the same physical space in a serial manner. Their descriptions of their parents have virtually nothing in common. Renee even denies that they are her parents. She doesn't claim different parents. She doesn't claim any at all, saying that she is a creation of this entity alone. Jo worshipped her father and describes him as a wise, gentle and loving. His only flaw she claims as her own biological problem. She was resigned to never completely pleasing him because she turned out to be his daughter instead of his son. Jo pities her mother for not being as rational as she describes herself and her father, but denies that Nancy could have abused her. Joan Frances says her mother is perfect, someone she models herself after. She is tortured because she is disobeying her mother by seeing me. Nancy reportedly told her daughter the other day, "For Mother's Day, I want a happy girl who realises how lucky she is." Since Mother's Day is a couple of days away, it would take a miracle to deliver that present. And so the pressure and guilt continue to grow. But Joan Frances's regular calls home make me sure that Nancy offers limited support and acceptance, as well as her dose of unrealistic expectations. Her father, Joan Frances said, was a cold, insensitive bastard who made life hell for my mother. Missy sees Daddy as a refuge from her terrifying mother. She remembers long hours sitting in a place she calls the dark until it was time for Daddy to come home. I'm not yet sure if Missy purposely hid there or if she was placed there. My guess right now is that both parents offered a mixture of good parenting and abuse. I think that Nancy and Ray Casey were both very troubled themselves. And we'll come in at chapter 7 next time.